I don't think I have to introduce Bill Gross since there's been an article in every magazine every week for the past year. Anyway, Bill Gross.
Thank you, Richard. This is my third TED, and I have to say that TED has actually changed my life. Richard, you've had a big impact on that. You've changed my career completely, because when I came here 2 years ago, I was so bombarded with ideas and so excited about the potential that I saw from some of the things I heard in this room that I actually changed my career. I went back to Knowledge Adventure and began looking at ways to expand some of the things we were doing, both in educational software and for information navigation on the internet. I began that course by promoting my brother to become CEO of the company so I could be chairman and work on some of these outside projects. And since then have founded a company called Idealab, which is a factory for ideas, to really allow myself and a group of other very talented people to pursue some of these great new technologies and build companies out of them very quickly. I think there's some great new potential to turn ideas into companies very fast now in a way that was never before possible. And smaller companies now have so much power to them. There used to be only economies of scale since the Industrial Revolution. Bigger was always only better. Bricks and mortar led to that, and more capital meant bigger companies. Now I feel with intellectual property there are diseconomies of scale, so the new ideal size company is a different size altogether, and you can now bring ideas to market with these new smaller companies much more powerfully. I want to show you a few of these ideas today. One particular one that's very relevant to both Richard and myself is information navigation and visualization. When I first started Knowledge Adventure, I really was passionate about giving my son David, who was 5 years old at the time, a chance to get excited about learning. I didn't really care about him learning any facts in particular, but I just wanted him to have a passion for learning. I got very lucky, and I had a fourth grade teacher that just instilled that passion in me, and it stayed with me for the rest of my life. When I went to Caltech, it was there. I just wanted to learn everything I could, and I wanted to make sure my son had that chance. And I knew I would do everything I could personally to give that to him, but I was worried that maybe in school, around his friends, it wouldn't be cool to be excited about learning. I wanted to make software for him and his generation to do that. And my dream was to build an entire virtual elementary school for his whole system, to cover all of the grades he would go through. And we have now done that. Knowledge Adventure now has a full K through 4 box currently, which we're giving away a free copy to all of you this afternoon. This is a $200 product that we've made over all these years. Thank you. And my dream to make this virtual world where kids could navigate and learn collaboratively has really come true, so I'm very excited about that. The other area I've been working in most recently is in this area of visual search, visual navigation. As a lot of people have said at the conference so far, the problem isn't enough information anymore, it's too much. It used to be, and I was working with information navigation and searching 10 years ago at Lotus. My brother and I did a product called Magellan to help search the files on your hard disk. And the problem we had at that time was there weren't enough files in electronic form yet. You had too many things on paper and other form, and now the problem is exactly the opposite. So now the reach is not the problem, but relevance. Actually focusing in on the stuff that's very important to you is the bigger problem. So I was very inspired 2 years ago by seeing some stuff that was done at MIT, some of the Muriel Cooper work and other things for navigating through 3D spaces of information, both text and otherwise. And I really wanted to try and figure out some ways to apply that to the web and to other information spaces. And I'll show you what we've done with that. My very first concept, I sat down and worked with some students from Art Center. We work with a lot of students from Art Center, a lot of students from Caltech, because we're located right in Pasadena, is this first idea of an info space. We made this little world that you could fly through, and as you navigate around, each of these little infospheres are things that can move up next to or move across from. And different pieces of information would be in different clusters. Now, I know it's hard for you to see what some of these different things are, but in each one of these infospheres are a bunch of controls, so you could play the movie that's associated with it, or read the text that's associated, or do other related events next to it. But what would happen is as you fly closer, say, to this kangaroo over here, other things nearby this kangaroo are things that are different conceptual relationships to it. Just like Richard was saying about the TV show, you might want to be able to take a look at other relationships to other kinds of bugs or other directions of where those bugs lived. Well, right here, you played right into this, Richard. Thank you for that setup. Here's this kangaroo, and down below it are some other animals. Over to the right, down below, it's very hard to see, but there's an aborigine because of this kangaroo being geographically located near Australia. Other things are located on different dimensions around this. right at the top there are little sliders around the rim, and I'm looking at the color slider. And as I pick up the color slider and move it over to the right, you'll see what happens. The whole information space rearranges, and stuff flies in closer, which is more related in the color dimension to the particular picture that you're looking at. And if I move that back, I can go off and slide back and go take a different dimension. So this was an initial conception that we made. This is just a mock-up, and then we wanted to go actually achieve this. And what we had to do was figure out what were the dimensions that people would actually come up with these relationships on. So the method we did to do that research was sending out an email to everybody in our companies, and we asked them to do some free association. And we gave them 25 words, and we asked them to pick any 5 they wanted, and take those 5 words and come up with 5 others, and then those 5 others, so they go 5 to 25 to 125. So people would say, we'd write down one of the words was Hawaii. So some people would say beach, ocean, scuba diving, wedding, crab, whatever they could think of. And we gathered all the things they said on the trigger word Hawaii. We'd say Eiffel Tower, and they'd say Washington Monument, George Washington Bridge, Paris, Arc de Triomphe, French Revolution, whatever they would think of. And we gathered all those things up, and we had a big, big list of things. And there weren't that many duplicates, ironically. There were a few things we did find. One, that you could almost tell the person, literally, if you covered up the name on the email, you could tell who it was just by looking at that profile. It was amazing how you could tell the way people think just by their free association from these words we gave them. But what we tried to do, rather than look for specific duplicates of free associations, was look for the dimensions on which they made the association. So, for example, why did they make that leap? So if we said Eiffel Tower and they said Washington Monument, what was the relationship? Well, the relationship was set member. It's something else in the membership of other statues. Or if we said train and they said fast, that was an adjectival relationship. Or if we said Honda and they said engine, that is a whole part relationship. But if we said Honda and they said Chevrolet, that's a set member relationship. It's another thing in the same set. So we came up with a whole bunch of different things, and we tried to cluster them down to the minimum number of things that would fully describe all the relationships that people could think of when they were looking at sets of information. And it basically turned out we found 18. There were 18 dimensions which could classify every different way someone had of thinking about all these free associations. And the most common one was adjectival. That was very common. You say something and people say fast, or big, or brown. You know, you say apple, they say red. And then some of the more infrequent ones are metaphorical and simile and other cause-effect relationships, but they're used by different people in different amounts. So then after discovering these 18, we went back and surveyed some people very extensively. We took them out to nice dinners. We had them do free associations all dinner long. And then we found out that different people had different profiles. In other words, if you took the frequency by which a certain person gives adjectival associations, or the frequency with a given person does whole part, you could get a little graph of that person, which again is a very good fingerprint of the way that person thinks. And when you think about it, other people you talk to, some people who actually appear very smart and who I think are very smart, are people who can actually pull out really deep, remote associations. Sometimes very smart people are people who can pull off different associations than you can. So we thought of making an information space with equalizer sliders, where you could almost dial in an equalization curve, which is your curve, or in fact, someone else's curve. You might want to dial in someone else's curve to think the way they think. In fact, one of the people who participated in our focus groups, because he's an investor in Knowledge Venture and was an investor in Idea Lab as well, is Steven Spielberg. And we went to him and we asked him a whole bunch of these terms, and he didn't even know what we were doing it for, so he wasn't trying to be outlandish or anything. But his associations were completely different than everybody else's. We would say train, and instead of getting fast or black or steam or whatever, we'd say my wife's wedding dress when she was walking down the aisle. Just instantly. I mean, just instantly, we had the wildest associations, the most unusual contour of anybody else we had. And it would be really great. We were actually thinking associations of the rich and famous. We were thinking of having an equalizer slider. It's actually not that funny, because think about how useful that would be to be able to dial in someone else's way of looking at the world when you're navigating through an information space. So we actually got very excited by that. So we took that next step of these 18 categories, and if you could switch to the Sony computer for a second, I'll show you an example of what we did with that. We took 1,000 images from our Knowledge Venture encyclopedia, and we took all the weightings that everybody gave for their free associations, averaged them out, set all the equalizer sliders at flat. So at the very bottom of the screen, there's those 18 equalizer sliders. They're all at unity right now. And now I can fly around and navigate through this information space. Now this time, we're moving through something that's real. This is a full space with all the images, 1,000 images from the encyclopedia, and all of them are located in space by the average of the whole group of how they had the association. So for example, I'll explain some of them to you, just how they came out. You can see Mona Lisa is not too far from Leonardo da Vinci in space here. Mona Lisa is also not too far from Notre Dame because of Mona Lisa being in the Louvre. Notre Dame is pretty close to the rose window. That's a geographical association. Over near Leonardo, Leonardo's not too far from the helicopter. That's a cause and effect, invention association. And as I move around through the space, I can navigate and see all kinds of interesting relationships that you wouldn't see in a linear look at this encyclopedia. The very powerful thing, though, is now when you start changing the relationship. So, for example, if I click right here and go down and pick up the geography slider, as I take this slider and move it up, you can see the whole information space moving, just as you saw in that sample. And as I move this slider, if I pin it, if I start moving it up all the way to the top of the screen, everything will move in latitude, longitude, so that everything is much closer based on geography. It's basically changing the weighting of the geography factor in this overall matrix. And now if I move around, if I go back over to the image and move around, you'll notice that Mona Lisa just moved a lot closer to the Louvre because I was putting an emphasis on geography. And notice the Louvre is very close to the Pompidou, and the Pompidou is very close to the Eiffel Tower, and so on. And notice that Notre Dame now is very close to this gargoyle over here, which was further away from it before. And again, if I pin that slider all the way to the top, and I can look at this in an aerial view from above, everything would be in one flat latitude, longitude kind of Mercator map of the Earth if I pinned them. But now you can take any one of the sliders and adjust it in different dimensions. Now this is somewhat useful for information like this, but it's subjective, although it's still very relative because you can just adjust your own balance of the priority of the way you want to organize the information space. Another place this might be very relevant to use would be for quantitative data as opposed to qualitative data. And I'll show you an example here of a way we applied this to the Fortune 500 and a way this might be able to be used for looking at all different kinds of sets of data. Here we have the Fortune 500, and I'm going to zoom out from this Fortune 500. I'm going to explain to you the algorithm we use for locating this stuff in multidimensional space. Notice there's floating around a little bit. Those are the names of the Fortune 500. It's floating around a little bit because all of these little points are basically connected to documents, but they're all connected to one another by a spring. And the spring tension is changed by the proportion of how strong you make that particular dimension. And there's many springs. There's basically 18 springs, or in this case, there's 15 dimensions. There's 15 springs connecting all the things. And then what we do is we perturb the whole matrix and let the whole thing oscillate and settle down to a steady state. So you'll see a little damping when I move this around. And then that steady state is the full matrix representation of trying to take 15 dimensions and map it into 3. It's the best way we were able to come up with of trying to take this complex information space and present it to you on the screen. So right now we have the Fortune 500 just lined up, but we have all the raw data behind here. So if I change revenue percent change from 1994 and I change this slider, notice how everything starts flying around because now I'm bumping up that particular factor and all the stuff moves around and it will settle down if I stop for a second. And if you want to zoom in a little bit, you can click right here to zoom in, and you can also click on this slider here to change the text size. So you can change the text height. I don't know if you can see the little dots floating around right now. That's the text height of 1 pixel, and I can zoom it up gradually, and you can see things further in the distance or closer up by adjusting the text height. And now if I change a different dimension, like profit change from 1994, I can change that, and now again, notice everything's moving around again, and I'll let it settle down, and now I might find some very interesting clusters that occur here. I notice that Phillips Petroleum, on these particular characteristics, is not too far from Metropolitan Life. But Exxon is pretty close to Phillips Petroleum. Those have some of the certain characteristics here. And also over here is Hewlett-Packard, McDonnell Douglas, and Goodyear Rubber back up here. What you can now do is mark certain companies that you might want to follow, like you might want to say, well, what companies that I might not know about have certain other interesting characteristics to Microsoft or some other stock that's rising. You'll be able to find that in this data. We think that this has applications way beyond just taking a look at financial data or just taking a look at textual information, but you could apply this to many, many different domains. Anytime you have multiple dimensional information that you want to sort and organize, maybe you're searching for a home. Instead of just having a linear list with Boolean criteria, what about if these are how much your priority is on view, how much your priority is on number of bedrooms and number of square feet. And as you rearrange all your priorities, that will just rearrange the whole information space to be exactly what your relevance criteria is. We think this is a great way to try and get better reach and better relevance. Well, better reach is not the problem. This will get you better relevance. And I'll show you how we're applying this to the web. To get this to work at the speed we want as a Java applet on the web, we've had to go to 2 dimensions. And actually, this is sort of a two-dimensional representation. But I'll show you what we're doing in Visual Search. Here in Visual Search, if you search for something like Bill Clinton, what you get back, we did a search on a really great database of articles on the web in Electric Library. And here's the 150 articles that come back. on with Bill Clinton in it from Electric Library. And one thing that we want to do is be able to automatically take this and classify it out in some sort of different dimension so that you'd be able to find the articles that you really care about. Now, you could try and narrow your criteria by Boolean criteria, but most people really don't know how to do that. So here, if I do cluster view as opposed to regular view, what this will do is display, it'll abstract out by looking at the articles themselves and display this cluster view, which is a 2D view done by the Spring method, breaking out those articles into these various categories. And this is doing it, I don't know if you can read that, but it says under drugs, it's got drugs, FDA, marijuana. Then drugs is not too far from healthcare, which is healthcare, hospital, hospitalization, hospitals, insurance. These are showing you some common words across all these documents. And then that's not too far from education, because some of those policy issues are similar. And then further over is Ireland, but over near Ireland is other geographical things over in that direction. We think this is a much better way to narrow down the particular information, and all we have to add to this now is a lasso so you can draw a little area around it so you can hone in on the particular area you want, zoom in one level further, and distribute the documents even further. And right now, of course, thank you. So very soon we will have this live on the web where you can go take a look at this, and we're very excited about this technology searching to new heights. I heard a lot of people complaining about just how hard it is to find stuff. A lot of new people who come to the web, but even people who are experienced in the web, how hard it is to find things. Very quickly, I need to show you one other idea that came from a TED conference as well, and that's a company called Idea Market. And it's very relevant, I think, to what's been discussed a lot at the conference so far, and it's the value and price of intellectual property. And Idea Market, I believe, is going to be the first open market for intellectual property on the web. We really think that although some people believe that information is free because the incremental cost of giving another copy of the information is near free, we don't believe that the value of the information is free. The marketplace still sets the value of that information or the cost of creating that information. And we want to make a marketplace to allow that to happen. If the information is inexpensive and valued low, it should be priced very low. So what we're trying to do here is build the first open marketplace for information. The way it will work is we've hired Peter Lewis from the New York Times and Jim Seymour from PC Magazine to be editorial directors of this service. And they're going to collect information that people submit, but they're going to be editorial, so you won't be searching the web, you'll be searching an editorial filter, and you'll have the filter of human beings to have selected good stuff for you. And then the net result is when you do a search, let's say you search for 401k, you'll get back a list of documents about 401ks. And you'll be able to look at all the documents, but you get all the information from the marketplace about those documents, including that this document on 401ks was written by David Holtz. It was read 373 times. It has an average grade of 7.6 out of 10 from all the people who have bought this document so far, and that document is $49. And this David Holtz, who submitted this document, gets a 50% royalty for life for submitting this document every time someone buys it. And they can now read more detail about the document, more detail about David Holtz before they commit to actually buying the document. They can see how the document's been graded, too, by other people. And we're using collaborative filtering to give you grades by other people who like documents like you, so you really get a good idea of whether you want to buy this or not. Then when you go ahead and click on it, you can go ahead and actually buy the document, and then that document is yours to use the contents of for your own use in any way, and we think that this will really allow information to find its own value. People might want to sell something for a dime, $1, $100, and by aggregating all the transactions in one place, we think we can make a very efficient way for people to come and actually gain the information that they want. This Idea Market, we think, will be somewhat revolutionary. You'll see it online in a few months. I hope many of you are potential contributors to this information source. We would love you to do it. We'd love to pay you the royalty. We would love great information to come here. And I've always dreamed ever since coming to TED of the time when you come up with an idea and you see a collection of a new idea that maybe sometimes I believe there are no new ideas. There's only rearranging of ideas, as we were talking about, too. When you get that insight of a new integration of different ideas from your reading or from whatever insight you have, and that idea in your brain is useful to someone else, I would love to find this way, and I hope Idea Market is the way, for that idea to find its way into the person who needs it, and for their cash to find a way into your pocket. And that's what I think Idea Market allows. Thank you. As I said, I think that this new intellectual property economy allows new companies to be formed in a way never before possible. We've started 20 companies in just the last year. You'll see a little bit more later about a company called PeopleLink, which is making a terrific buddy system for the internet for you to navigate around and see other people who are live online with you simultaneously. There's a special TED version of that. We've made a company called City Search, which is a tremendous company to allow people to connect communities in highly local targeted efforts. I really urge you, if you have a great idea, to try and implement that idea. It's so much faster to take an idea to market than ever before possible. It doesn't require as much capital in the past. Great ideas can really, really break through. I hope you've seen some of the great work that the people have done on these projects here. Tom Hughes, who's our designer, has created all these screens. I hope if you like those, you'll talk to him afterwards, and I'd love to talk to you after the break. Thank you very much. You've been a great audience.